Who's ready to rock and roll? Today is full of wild cards, guys. I am so excited to be talking about Moses. Today we get to talk about Moses and him fleeing to Midianite territory, the burning bush. Jesus heals an epileptic, demon-possessed boy. He gets a tax to pay the sanctuary out of the mouth of a fish. It's going to be so good. I hope you're doing well this morning or night or whatever time of day it is. I hope you're doing well. It means a lot that you're here. I love doing this with you. Leave a comment of how I can be praying for you. Give the video a like. Let me know that you're here. I love, love, love seeing new people around. I also love praying for you. So if you could let me know how I could be praying for you, that would just make it all the more specific. But really hope you guys are doing well. You're like, we've made it into Exodus. All right. Just take a second on that. We made it into Exodus. We're trucking right along. Honestly, it's the end of January and I'm kind of like, it's hard because I love doing this. And I got to thinking about it and I was like, we only have like 11 more of those. That's not a lot. Like, if you really think about that, like we have 11 more months of the year. And this one flew by. I don't know about y'all. I've been very busy, but like it flew by. So I'm like, we only have 11 more of those. It feels like it's flying by. Okay, so thanks for being here. Glad you're here. Yeah, January is like, it's my major deadline season at work. So I think it's only up from here for me. That's how I feel every year. I'm like, don't make any major decisions in January. I think that's why God kind of like laughed and challenged me on this, because like I literally made a promise to myself, like nothing to do with the Lord. Last year or 2 years ago, I was like, all right, I used to be like really big on setting like year goals in January, with the Lord and just kind of like, what are your intentions for this year? And then I got to a place where I was so fed up with my January deadlines and just so underwater with them that I was like, all right, Lord, like no more new things in January. How does that sound? Like, I won't start anything new. I'm not going to go on a diet. I'm not going to like do anything crazy. I'm not going to like February is the start of my year. Okay. And then December 8th of last year, he was like, January 1st, you're starting this little video thing. Okay. So the Lord loves to challenge us. Actually, we see that today. It toughens us up. We see that today with Moses. So, hey, how about that segue? That was not even intentional. Okay, so today we're getting into Exodus 2:11 through 3:22. Remember, yesterday Moses was born. All right, Joseph and his sons, and then his other brothers from Jacob. They are the start of the Israelite tribes. Okay, we've got all their names. All of their kiddos are descending from them. And it's been about 300 years of that. So generations have come and gone. And then that's about 300 of the 400 years that we're spending in foreign territory as God told Abraham would happen. So we're spending this time in foreign territory in a land not our own. But the promise is that we will come up out and be back into the promised land of Canaan. So we see today where Moses, yesterday he was taken by Pharaoh's daughter. Remember, they were casting all the boys into the Nile. If they were born as a boy, too many. So they were atrociously tossing them all into the Nile. And then Pharaoh's daughter came down to bathe and saw the baby in a basket, decided to have him nursed by Hebrew, his mom. And then he is raised, with his mother and his sister by the permission of Pharaoh's daughter, in the promise that like he's going to be raised to be her son. So he has been Pharaoh's son now for a little bit, where we pick up today. And, it's thought that because he was raised in the palace, a couple things to keep in mind as we're reading this today. His mother must have raised him in faith for Yahweh. Obviously she did, but like that stuck because all the luxury of Egypt did not change his mind of who his loyalty was, faith was. I saw a list yesterday as I was researching, like, of all the Egyptian gods. My goodness. There are so many. So many. Every aspect of life literally had a god over it, like fertility and the sun and the rain and the land and the sand and the statues and just every single thing had a god. So, little g God. They worshipped other gods. And so Moses was raised by his mother, which gave him the opportunity to learn about Yahweh and to have the Hebrew faith. And then he was put in the palace to be Pharaoh's daughter's baby. So that never left him. He obviously still had faith in Yahweh. Goes to show no riches of the world. I mean, you're growing up in Pharaoh's house, and ancient Egypt is the mega city of ancient civilizations. So all the luxury of the world could not turn him from Yahweh. Okay, so to the point that do we all know how this ends? It's fun for me when I hear people that are like, they haven't read the Bible yet. I have a friend, I know she's watching, but I have a friend who, like, we were doing a study together last year, a small group at church, and we would talk about certain things, and she would joke. She's like, no, that's a spoiler. I haven't gotten there yet. And so it's just funny to me. I'm like, do we all know how this ends? Like, am I saying too much too soon sometimes? Anyways, that is amazing to me. Like, so fun to hear that, because, like, anyways, I just get excited when people read it for the first time. It's exciting. It's like, these are the best story. I mean, so much literature derives from, like, the themes that started here. So anyway, they're just amazing stories. All right. All that to say, Moses grew up in Pharaoh's palace. I don't know, palace, word that I have for it. Pyramid? I don't know the word for that. Grew up in the riches of Egypt, and he grew to considerable power. So there are documents that say that he ruled an army in the south, commanded an army. So he was somewhat of their military leader. Don't know if he was the only one, probably one of many, but he had grown into power over this army. And so he had training. He probably had a great education. This is not an uneducated people group. Okay. This is, Egypt. So very advanced civilization for the time. All right, so we're picking up in verse 11 of chapter 2. Moses flees to Midian, okay? All right, one day after Moses had grown up, he went out to where his own people were and watched them at their hard labor. So he's going out to see the Jewish people, the Israelites. He saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his own people. Looking this way and that and seeing no one, he killed the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. Okay, surprise. The next day, he went out and saw two Hebrews fighting. He asked the one in the wrong, "Why are you hitting your fellow Hebrew?" The man said, "Who made you ruler and judge over us? Are you thinking of killing me as you killed the Egyptian?" Then Moses was afraid and thought, "What I did must have become known." So he looked around and he thought no one was watching. Somehow they knew it was him, because he's like, "Are you going to kill me like you killed that other guy?" And Moses is like, "Oh, I didn't know anyone knew about that." When Pharaoh heard of this, he tried to kill Moses, his grandson, by adoption, but high stakes at the time. People's tempers, barbaric a little bit. All right, when Pharaoh heard of this, he tried to kill Moses, but Moses fled from Pharaoh and went to live in Midian, where he sat down by a well. Now a priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came to draw water and fill the troughs to water their father's flock. Some shepherds came along and drove them away, but Moses got up and came to their rescue and watered their flock. When the girls returned to Reuel, their father, he asked them, "Why have you returned so early today?" They answered, "An Egyptian rescued us from the shepherds. He even drew water for us and watered the flocks." "And where is he?" Reuel asked his daughters. "Why did you leave him? Invite him to have something to eat." So they're in Midian, okay? This is Midianite territory. The dad is a priest, it says. And so he would have been somewhat of a ruler of his community, okay? And also a priest. So they're practicing Hebrew faith. So he is, these are actually, they're descendants of Abraham from Keturah. So this is, part of the Abrahamic lineage, just not the exact one we've been following. But remember, Abraham was going to be made into many nations, and so he has kids everywhere. So all that to say, they come from Keturah, and they are practicing Hebrew faith. And dad, who's a priest, asks them, invite that Egyptian to come have something to eat. Verse 21, Moses agreed to stay with the man who gave his daughter Zipporah to Moses in marriage. Zipporah gave birth to a son, and Moses named him Gershom, saying, "I have become a foreigner in a foreign land." What's interesting to me is that Moses is the one writing this. So this is a firsthand account. This is where we get the good, like he's, he named him Gershom, saying, "I have become a foreigner in a foreign land." During that long period, the king of Egypt died. The Israelites groaned in their slavery and cried out, and their cry for help because of their slavery went up to God. God heard their groaning, and he remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. So God looked on the Israelites and was concerned about them. Okay, we see a lot about the heart of the Father there, where this happens all through Exodus, by the way, where we learn these kind of details, who God is, where it's like God hears us. He remembered his covenant. So he remembers what he promised. And then he looked on the Israelites and was concerned about them. Okay, so he hears us and he has the ability, he do anything he wants to, but it's cool it's very profound revelation to think of God being concerned about us. Okay, so he's watching and he's concerned. He is involved in our life. This coffee's so good today. I gotta go work here in a little bit, and I'm like chugging coffee. Like it's gonna be a long day. All right, Moses and the burning bush, chapter 3. What a privilege, though. Honestly, like the more I'm reading the Bible, I'm so immersed in it because of how many times I'm going through it to like read it, write it, record it, edit it, publish it, all that. Like I'm loving it that I get to go through it like 5 times a day. And anyways, it's so cool. Read the Bible my whole life and then do this in this like full immersion process for this year. And it is changing everything all over again. Like the more you dig into it, the more layers you pull back. Like I am experiencing life change in so many ways where like even the smallest things, it's funny how like when all you do is read the Bible and study the Bible and talk about the Bible, it has a way of really highlighting the things that are not of the Bible. So like even me just saying like it's going to be a long day, my thoughts immediately corrected to like, what a privilege I get to go to work. Like what a privilege I get to like there are periods of time where people have been enslaved. Like people would be killing to live how I live right now in ancient Egypt as a Hebrew. Like I have the ability to spread my faith with no parameters. Like I live in America. You know what I mean? Like I don't have any silencing going on. Sure, there's persecution, but that's always existed for Christians. Again, that's how my friend like came to the idea that Christianity was real, because the enemy is so attacking Christianity. Like the other religions, it's kind of like you do you until it's Christianity. And then it's like, why is there so much opposition to this one? Because there's a very real enemy that doesn't want you to get close to it, doesn't want you to know that it's true. So anyway, all that to say, immersing yourself in the Bible changes everything. I mean, I feel like, we all can think that, but like, try it out. I am enjoying seeing me transformed. It feels like I've gotten saved all over again and like filled with the Holy Spirit all over again, because there's moments where I just don't recognize myself. I'm like, oh, I would typically like just say small complaints like, oh, it's gonna be such a long day, and not think twice about it. Now I'm kind of like, long day. Am I going to war? Am I sleep deprived? I slept on a pretty good mattress last night, and I'm drinking coffee with cookie dough syrup in it that has no calories because I'm trying to lose weight. Not only do I have the ability to gain weight because I have so much food in this house, and I was literally thinking, oh, I haven't gone to the grocery store yet. Perspective matters. All right, that was a tangent. Chapter 3. Now Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law. Notice he was called Ruel a second ago, so he's got 2 names. Jethro, the priest of Midian. Okay, still confirming, same guy. And he fled the flock, and he led the flock to the far side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God, Mount Horeb. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in flames of fire from within a bush. Moses saw that though the bush was on fire, it did not burn up. So Moses thought, I will go over and see this strange sight, why the bush does not burn up. When the Lord saw that he had gone over to look, God called to him from within the bush, Moses, Moses. And Moses said, here I am. Do not come any closer, God said. Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground. Then he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. At this, Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. Okay, that reminds me of Eden, where it's like, they feel ashamed and God's calling out to them and trying to find Adam and Eve, and they hide themselves in their shame. That was the first revelation they had, that they should be hidden and not naked and unafraid and unashamed. The Lord said, I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I have heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I am concerned about their suffering. Okay, so we learn more about the heart of the Father here. So I have come down to rescue them from the hand of the Egyptians and to bring them up out of the land to a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey, the home of the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. And now the cry of the Israelites has reached me, and I have seen the way the Egyptians are oppressing them. So now go, I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. Okay, so notice he says, I have come down to rescue them. So I'm sending you, but I have come down to rescue Egypt. And then we also see again, he always comes, this is a theme all throughout the Bible, but God always comes our way to rescue us, okay? We're just debunking the myth that God doesn't care, God doesn't see, God doesn't listen, he doesn't hear. Not true. Deception from the enemy, okay? Remember, deception is because you think it's actually real. You don't think it's a lie. So if that's something that you're believing is that God hasn't heard me in a long time, remind yourself, he does, okay? That's coming into agreement with a lie from Satan. So we're not here to do that. We're here to correct that with the knowledge of the truth. So you only believe lies to the extent that you don't know truth. And then, okay, truth is going to correct the lie. Allow that to happen within you, and you will be fulfilled in knowing who the Lord actually is. All right, verse 11. But Moses said to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? All right, so Moses is like, who am I? But remember, we just talked about it. God said, I have come down to rescue. And God said, I will be with you. And this will be the sign to you that it is I who have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God on this mountain. Okay, so remember, he's on Mount Horeb, and God is saying, here's the sign. When you pull the people out of Egypt, you will worship God on this very mountain. Moses said to God, suppose I go to the Israelites and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you. And they ask me, what is his name? Then what shall I tell them? God said to Moses, okay, we get a good name for God here. They're all good names, but we get another name for God here. God said to Moses, I am who I am. That is what you are to say to the Israelites. I am has sent me to you. God also said to Moses, say to the Israelites, the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my name forever, the name you shall call me from generation to generation. So we still do that today. We still call him I am. He is the I am. You hear that a lot in songs. This is where it comes from. And it's all over the Bible. But I am in the Hebrew, it just means to be. So if you've ever learned another language, like Spanish, ser, to be, it's literally it exists. Okay. It's kind of the way of saying this is a self-sufficient existing state that is an eternal presence. Okay. So I am. There's a better way to say it. And that, to me, I'm just that is why it's holy. It's I couldn't think of a better name for the Lord. I am. I am self-sustaining. I have always existed and I always will exist. The I am, the eternal being, to be, has sent me. And appealing to this is the God of your father Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, so that they know this is not some Egyptian God or some sort, they would be very, very careful to not just follow some God. And so he's saying the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, same God, ordering you to come up out of Egypt. Verse 16. And I read this and I'm I feel it's God's way of appealing to Moses' language. God speaks to us in language that we understand. So, and he knows our background. So anyways, he says, go assemble the elders of Israel. And I'm thinking he's talking to a commander of an army. Go assemble the elders of Israel. Just to me, that was a little small revelation on my end. Just thought I'd share. Go assemble the elders of Israel and say to them, the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, here he says it again, appeared to me and said, I have watched over you and have seen what has been done to you in Egypt. And I have promised to bring you up out of your misery in Egypt into the land of the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites, a land flowing with milk and honey. The elders of Israel will listen to you. Then you and the elders are to go to the king of Egypt and say to him, the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, met with us. Let us take a 3-day journey into the wilderness to offer sacrifices to the Lord our God. But I know that the king of Egypt will not let you go unless a mighty hand compels him. So I will stretch out my hand and strike the Egyptians with all the wonders that I will perform among them. After that, he will let you go. Okay, so again, God lets us in on the future here. He's like, you're going to go and ask Pharaoh, let us go a 3-day journey into the wilderness to offer sacrifices to our God because we've heard from him. And Pharaoh's going to say no. So just like he warned them, like, you're going to be in a land not your own for 400 years, okay? He gives a heads up, just as Jesus, we were studying yesterday or maybe the day before, he's telling his disciples, I'm going to be killed, okay? And then I'm going to rise 3 days later. So he doesn't keep these secrets from us. He tells us in the right timing what's going to happen to sustain us in the middle of the trial. So he's saying, you're going to go ask Pharaoh, but don't be afraid when Pharaoh says he's not going to let you out, okay? That's going to happen. And then a mighty hand, my hand, will compel him, and then he will let you go. So Moses can hang on to that promise, take that to the bank and go, I'm going to wait for the Lord to compel him because that's what it's going to take. But until then, I'm going to keep asking. Verse 21, and I will make the Egyptians favorably disposed towards this people so that when you leave, you will not go empty-handed. Every woman is to ask her neighbor and any woman living in her house for articles of silver and gold and for clothing, which you will put on your sons and daughters, and so you will plunder the Egyptians. Okay, so he's not only saying you're going to be pulled up out of this misery and slavery that I see you in, but, and think about that for a second. He sees you in your misery. Okay, he's concerned about you in your misery. He wants to deliver you out of that. And then you will plunder the Egyptians. So he's not even letting you go empty-handed, so that when you leave, you will not go empty-handed, it says in verse 22, verse 21. So the Lord is providing everything here. He's like, I'm taking care of them. I'm sending you in to do it, but I'm acting through you. I'm going to be the one that compels him to go. So, and then he says, I will make Egyptians favorably disposed towards this people. So favor comes from the Lord. This is something only he can do. Like, he has put a favor on them to be favorably disposed to the Egyptians, to where when they leave, when they're going to be so compelled to let them leave that they're going to send them out with their goal. Like, imagine hearing that for the first time before, like, we hear it knowing it happened. Imagine hearing that for the first time. You're in the most developed civilization up to that point, with kings and rulers and pharaohs and education and all kinds of resources, carts, chariots, all that. Like, this is not it's not a like tribal community. This in the tribal sense that we think of, there were the tribes of Israel, but this is a massive community. Okay. And they're about to go and say, hey, can we leave? They're enslaved there and they're put into forced manual labor. And they're going to be like, hey, Pharaoh, we need to go worship our God. So we're going to jet. And he's like, God's like, he's going to say no, but I will compel him and I will give them so much favor that they're going to send you out with their riches. In what world do you go to the person who owns you, your master in slavery, and you say, I'm going to go, and they're like, yeah, take the car, take the car, take the money, leave. Okay. God's favor. All right. I also wonder if archaeology would prove, I'm like, God, in heaven, can I be an archaeologist? Can I dig up the old earth on the new earth? I don't know how that's going to work, obviously, when it's restored. I want to see all the stuff. And I want to be one to find it. I just digging it up and having it revealed, and the search and the hunt and the like picture that last brush of sand when you see something written that hasn't been touched in thousands of years. I just, that's got to be so exciting. So I wonder, if archaeology would show that there were Egyptian riches in Canaan, in the Canaanite country, Hivite country. Like, that's like, if they're being sent out with all these riches to put on their sons and daughters so that they plunder the Egyptians, that stuff's got to go with them somewhere. Granted, they do wander around in the wilderness, so maybe they shed some of it there because that would be a lot to carry. But I don't know. I mean, that would be a find, would be to see the trail of the Israelites coming out of Egypt left by the plunder that they took from the Egyptians. That would be insane. Okay. And then, a couple other things of note before we move into Matthew. So the time in Midian is not wasted, obviously, because he finds his wife and, the priest has favor on him. He lives with them and it gives him this place to be developed into the leader that God has designed him to be, to pull the Egyptians or to pull the Hebrews out of the Egyptian territory. Now, in Midian, this is in the desert. So he spends these 40 years-ish in Midian with Jethro, when he fled because he killed someone. This is again how God uses our sin to then prepare us or to use us, or, it's not saying go sin. It's just saying the Lord will redeem it. Okay. There's no excuse. The Apostle Paul tells us that this is not an excuse to go on sinning. Okay. But so he kills that Egyptian that was beating up the Hebrew, and he hides him in the sand, thinks no one sees. Obviously they saw, so he's scared for his life. Pharaoh tries to kill him, and so he jets to Midian, okay? He's in Midian, and here's how God is using that. He is in the desert territory that he is going to have to navigate to get the Israelites out of Egypt. Okay, he spends 40 years in that desert. He's getting to know the territory that they're going to flee through. Okay, so he's being exposed to all of that, like this life, this environment that, like, he's toughening up for the journey, and he's also learning the desert. Okay, in this time that he's gone. Now, the other thing that's nuts is this burning bush, moment that comes out of him in Mount Horeb, where he's being called back to go get the Hebrews out of Egypt. He's 80 years old when that happens. Okay, because he's a young man when he flees Egypt, and then he spends 40 years in Midian. Okay, he's 80 years old when the burning bush moment happens. So he gives kind of a lot of excuses. If you think that you're ever too far, I mean, notice Joseph lived to like 110. I think Jacob like 130. So like he's on in years. Like this is like the lifespan is pretty, he's on up there. This isn't like 80 out of 400 years old. This is, he's getting close to the end of where people lived out their age. And actually, because of the cruel labor, I was also looking into some of the archaeological finds of just Egyptian lifespan and things at that time. Because of the slavery and the malnutrition and all the things, it wouldn't be uncommon for them to live till like 40, 50 years old. I mean, there's all kinds of things that can happen to you in that day and age that would lead to you dying earlier. So all that to say, he's made it to 80, and he's giving quite a few excuses along the way. We'll see where he's like, am I really the one that you're going to want to use? But what if you didn't? What if you chose someone else? But I have a hard time speaking in front of people, but I have a hard, So he throws out a lot of excuses. And the Lord is like, you're the one I'm asking to go. And it just goes to show, like, we need to stay, even in our old age, rich coming from me. I get it. but we need to stay flexible. Like, there are still some things. I'm in my 30s now. There's some things that I'm like, did that catch anyone off guard? I know, like, I don't look, I hear that all the time at like work and stuff. They're like, you're what? Anyway, I get it. Look that credible yet, but I'll appreciate it when I'm older. How long do you say that? Is 30 still an okay time to say that, or is this older? I don't know. So anyway, I'm in my 30s, and I do feel like there are times where I'm like I've gotten kind of rigid in my thinking. I've gotten kind of like, this is who I am. This is what I need. And like, imagine being 80 and being told you're going to leave the place that you've now had your wife, had your kids, and you're going to go get all the slaves out of Egypt. I can imagine being like, I think I'm going to have my tea by this well because I'm old. And that sounds like an assignment for a young lad. Okay, so he's calling him up out. But remember, because he's had all this training, okay, he also had favor because he was the son of Pharaoh. So he knows how their rulership works. But granted, yeah, Pharaoh tried to kill him. So it does say that while he was in Midian, that Pharaoh died. So it's the next one. But whew, yeah. Okay, how are we feeling about Exodus? Leave it in the comments. Are you excited about it? A lot of people get to Exodus and they're like, oh, this is getting good. So just, how are we feeling? Are we liking this book? I feel like, is this a book club? Are we liking this book? We're going to go into Matthew 17, 10 through 27, verse 10. The disciples asked him, why then do the teachers of the law say that Elijah must come first? Jesus replied, to be sure, Elijah comes and will restore all things. But I tell you, Elijah has already come, and they did not recognize him, but have done to him everything they wished. In the same way, the Son of Man is going to suffer at their hands. Then the disciples understood that he was talking to them about John the Baptist. Okay, so this confirms for us, John the Baptist was the Elijah-like figure that came to herald the coming of Christ. So it is tough to think that he's saying he did come and they missed it. Okay, and then in the same way, the Son of Man is going to suffer at their hands because they're missing it. Okay, Jesus heals a demon-possessed boy, verse 14. When they came to the crowd, a man approached Jesus and knelt before him. Lord, have mercy on my son, he said. He has seizures and is suffering greatly. He often falls into the fire or into the water. I brought him to your disciples, but they could not heal him. So, also, if you see, he's explaining he often falls into the fire and into the water. So that sounds more like demon possession, where it's like trying to harm this person. Verse 17, you unbelieving and perverse generation, Jesus replied. How long shall I stay with you? How long shall I put up with you? Bring the boy here to me. Jesus rebuked the demon, and it came out of the boy, and he was healed at that moment. So he's like, how long do I put up with you guys, you unbelieving and perverse generation? Then the disciples came to Jesus in private and asked, why couldn't we drive it out? He replied, because you have so little faith. Truly, I tell you, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move. Nothing will be impossible for you. So this is part of why I love that faith is in my name. I mean, faith is the key ingredient, okay? Like, we are believing people. Like, this is our faith. So there's a reason that it is called that. He's saying you have so little faith, but if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, smallest seed, by the way, you can, and grows into a massive tree. So that's, there's some parable there, but you can say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move. Nothing will be impossible for you. So they're like, why couldn't we do it? And so that resonates when we're believing for something and we're like, it's not happening. So Hebrews tells us faith is the substance of things unseen. It's the evidence of things unseen. So our faith is a reflection of the unseen things. Okay. So anyways, he's saying you of little faith. So our faith is the substance of the things unseen. Okay. That is the proof. All right. So verse 22, Jesus predicts his death a second time. When they came together in Galilee, he said to them, the Son of Man is going to be delivered into the hands of men. They will kill him, and on the third day he will be raised to life. And the disciples were filled with grief. Okay, so again, he's giving them a heads up. Like, I'm going to be killed, and then I'm going to be raised up on the third day. All right, we'll see how quickly they forget that when he dies. Verse 24, the temple tax. This story is nuts. All right. After Jesus and his disciples arrived in Capernaum, the collectors of the 2 drachma temple tax came to Peter and asked, doesn't your teacher pay the temple tax? Okay, so they're trying to kind of catch him. It's like a little gotcha moment, but this is a poll tax for all men over the age of 20. So, and a drachma is like a day's wages. So it's a 2 drachma temple tax. So 2 days' wages temple tax to the temple, which would be like their sanctuary. So like they're saying, doesn't he pay the temple tax? Yes, he does, he replied. When Peter came into the house, Jesus was the first to speak. What do you think, Simon? He asked. From whom do the kings of the earth collect duty and taxes? From their own children or from others? So Jesus is comparing this to his father. He's saying, Simon, what do you think? And I love how he asks questions. Like, he knows, but he's encouraging the conversation. He's saying, Simon, what do you think? And he's like, do the kings typically collect taxes from their kids? Or is it from the people? From the other, Peter answers. Verse 26, from others, Peter answered. Then the children are exempt, Jesus said to him. But so that we may not cause offense, go to the lake and throw out your line. Okay, so breaking down a couple things before we see this absolute miracle. The children are exempt. So he has Simon Peter say that. And then Jesus confirms. He's like, yeah, the children are exempt from taxes. So he's like, this temple is my father's house. And so he's saying, I of all people, I'm the son of God. So typically you wouldn't collect taxes from the son of God on the house that is his father's house. So he's like, this is my family's house. I don't necessarily need to pay taxes to it, but so that we may not cause offense, he's like, I don't want to be misunderstood here. My attitude is like not that, I would be offensive. So he says he's not trying to cause offense. And so he says, go to the lake and throw out your line. And then we pick up, take the first fish you catch, open its mouth, and you will find a 4 drachma coin. Take it and give it to them for my tax and yours. Okay. of all the ways to show us that he can provide, like, that's got to be the craziest. I mean, there's so many crazy, like we just talked about the burning bush, like that's nuts too. But this scenario challenges our ability to go, oh, he's in charge of everything. Like, are we that expectant for provision? Do we know how badly he wants to care for us and provide for us, to the point where Jesus just talked about having faith? And he's like, go cast your line. When you catch a fish, the first one you catch is going to have a 4 drachma coin in its mouth. What? Of all the creative ways, like sometimes we box it in. We're like, it should look like this or that. Are we believing for supernatural provision? Are we believing that he can do it out of anything? Out of catching a fish? That would never cross my mind. That would never in a million years cross my mind to do. He's saying, get creative. Like, he can provide supernaturally. Are we that expectant? Or are we putting him in a box of like, okay, well, I'm going to need to figure this out, so maybe I need to work harder? You can, I mean, we need to have disciplines. We need to work hard. Obviously, he's not saying don't work hard. He's just saying he can provide supernaturally, okay? So it is shocking. I mean, whenever I read that story, I'm like, what? It never gets old. Like, the first fish you catch, how out of your control would that be? Like that, you can't control what fish bites on that hook. You can't, and people say he's not real. Whoa. If you saw my video from yesterday, I mean, that reminds me of the lady that's like, your mythology. And I'm like, she probably thinks that's a cute story. There's so many historical accounts. Okay. I'm not even going to get into that again. People need to research stuff. All right. Psalm 22, 1-18. This is a huge prophecy of Jesus in this one. So David, obviously King David, before Jesus existed, is anguishing and writing the Psalms. He's writing Psalm 22 in anguish, okay? And then he is extremely prophetic of Jesus in this one. There are things that he says that don't even apply to him, but he's speaking prophetically, and they are things that apply directly to Jesus. So hundreds of years later. All right, so let's be on the lookout for those. I'll stop us as we go to let us know where they are. Verse 1, my God, why have you forsaken me? That's actually our first one, okay? Those are Jesus's dying words on the cross. And it could be, that Jesus is quoting this psalm on the cross, but that's number 1. Why are you so far from saving me? So far from my cries of anguish, which remember, we just read in Exodus about how near he is to our concerns, about how much he sees us in our misery. So it's a real place of desperation to say, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from saving me and so far from my cries of anguish? My God, I cry out by day, but you do not answer, by night, but I find no rest. Yet you are enthroned as the Holy One. You are the one Israel praises. In you our ancestors put their trust. They trusted and you delivered them. To you they cried out and were saved. In you they trusted and were not put to shame. But I am a worm and not a man, scorned by everyone, despised by people. That I can't help but think when he says, I am a worm and not a man. Did y'all ever sing that song growing up? Like, everybody hates me, nobody likes me, guess I'll go eat worms. Like, he's calling himself a worm. That's a low place to like, I'm a worm. All right. Verse 7, all who see me mock me. Sorry, can't get over the worm. All who see me mock me. They hurl insults, shaking their heads. He trusts in the Lord, they say. Let the Lord rescue him. Let him deliver him, since he delights in him. Okay, so Jesus's enemies start mocking him on the cross, saying things like this. They're like, where's your Lord? Okay, don't let the Lord rescue him, right? He claims that he loves the Lord and he delights in the Lord. He claims that the Lord is on his side. So let your God save you. Okay, so that's prophesying that. Verse 9, yet you brought me out of the womb. You made me trust in you, even at my mother's breast. From birth I was cast on you. From my mother's womb, you have been my God. Do not be far from me, for trouble is near. There is no one to help. Many bulls surround me. Strong bulls of Bashan encircle me. Roaring lions that tear their prey open their mouths wide against me. I am poured out like water, and all of my bones are out of joint. My heart has turned to wax. It is melted within me. My mouth is dried up like a potsherd, and my tongue sticks to the roof of my mouth. You lay me in the dust of death. Okay, so we're clearly like this is a he's saying this and yet it's so literal about Jesus's crucifixion. I'm poured out like water. All my bones are out of joint. I mean, my mouth is dry. Like he asks for a drink because he's so thirsty on the cross. I mean, it's crazy to see like David is like, he's feeling this way and Jesus actually goes through it. Verse 16, dogs surround me. A pack of villains encircles me. They pierce my hands and feet. All my bones are on display. People stare and gloat over me. They divide my clothes among them and cast lots for my garment. Okay, so all of those things come to fruition in the crucifixion of Jesus. So dogs and villains encircle him. They pierce his hands and feet. I mean, why would King David say that if it was not prophecy? That doesn't apply to him. They pierce his hands and feet. All my bones are on display. They stare and gloat over me. They divide my clothes among them, which they cast lots for and divide them up. I mean, so that's just extremely prophetic of what Jesus goes through. All right, we're moving into our Proverbs. It's 5:7-14. Now then, my sons, listen to me. Do not turn aside from what I say. Keep to a path far from her. Do not go near the door of her house, lest you lose your honor to others and your dignity to one who is cruel, lest strangers feast on your wealth and your toil enrich the house of another. At the end of your life, you will groan. When your flesh and body are spent, you will say, how I hated discipline, how my heart spurned correction. I would not obey my teachers or turn my ear to my instructors, and I was soon in serious trouble in the assembly of God's people. So that reminds me of like kids when they think they know best and you're like, don't run into the street. And they're like, but I like the road. Like, I hated correction. I spurned correction. I refused to turn my ear to instructions. I wouldn't obey my teachers. I was soon in serious trouble. And that's the thing with the Bible. It is here to give us instruction to prevent our destruction. Okay, so I didn't mean to rhyme there. But the reason we have this instruction is so that we live out of serious trouble. Like the Lord is trying to protect us. And so it says, and soon I was in serious trouble in the assembly of God's people. Like it is preventing you from having to go through life in destruction, despair at the hand of the enemy. So if you're not clinging to these truths and you're really afraid of correction and you're not open-hearted to like, how can I be disciplined? Remember, the Father disciplines those he loves. Okay, it's just like good parenting. A child with no discipline is really a neglected child. So to be disciplined is to have the attention of your Father, for him to want to raise you up and to have you stay out of trouble. Okay, it's a loving father's move. That's why we can understand it and go, oh, he's not just trying to put a bunch of rules on me. It's not to have rules and regulations in a way that we show him we worship him and love him. Yes, children do that out of honor for their parents often, and it is a reflection of their love, but the heart behind it is to protect you. Okay, so most parents would prioritize that over getting the affection back. It's like, well, just be safe at the very minimum, okay? So these guardrails for life are meant to help us. They're not meant to be some sort of punishment of, right and wrong so that we show our love for the Lord. It's the same way with fasting that we talked about. Like, it's not to prove that you will punish yourself for him. That is not what he wants. He doesn't want you to be punished. This whole passage today in Exodus is like, he wants to pull you up out of your destruction and despair. He wants to pull you up out of your anguish and misery. Like, he sees you. He's concerned, it says, about you. I mean, what a beautiful word. I would love to see what that is in the Hebrew. If I find it, I'll put it on the screen, a little definition, but concerned for you. I'm just how beautiful that is. So let's pray today to realize that he hears us. He is concerned for us. He is wanting to help us. He can provide supernaturally. He put a 4-drachma coin in the mouth of a fish, whatever fish that Simon Peter was going to catch. I mean, and he appeals to how we speak. He appealed to the fact that Simon Peter was a fisherman. He appealed to the fact that Moses was the commander of an army. And he said, go assemble the Israelites. I mean, he talks in a way that we can understand. When they said, Jesus, why couldn't we do it? He explained. He answers our questions. So let's come to the Lord in boldness. Like, we want to get close to you, God. Help us understand. Help us understand. Moldable so that we can also obey your commands and be disciplined in a life-giving way. Like, I don't know if you've had a bad experience with discipline, but if discipline came out of a place of abuse, that is something that came from the enemy. So good parent disciplines the child that he loves. Again, if a child wasn't disciplined, that is a high form of neglect because you're just letting a child run their life. They don't have the maturity to do that. They don't have the wisdom to make wise choices. So all that to say, it's a blessing. It's a blessing to be disciplined. So let's lean into that. Okay. So even in our day-to-day life now as adults, it's a blessing to be disciplined. It's a blessing to learn from the Father, to be taught. Then we grow and get better. Then we have favor. Then we succeed. I mean, it just, so, and on and on and on. All right, let's pray. And then we'll be back tomorrow for day 27. All right. God, thank you so much for your wisdom. Thank you for showing us that a good father disciplines. God, we just thank you for your heart today, revealed in Exodus and in Matthew and Psalm and Proverbs. In all of it, we get to know your heart more, God. And so we thank you that really in the passages today, we see that you are concerned with us. You hear our misery and anguish, God. You hear us when we cry out. You hear us from the depths of our souls, the way that King David cried out in Psalm 22, the misery that he was experiencing. And you still use that in a prophetic way. You still use that in a way that gives us favor, like you said in Exodus. Like, you go before us. You pave the way. You make straight the path. You put favor on us that could never exist otherwise. You do the things that man can simply not do. And you show us that as we come in an effort to not offend, the way that Jesus said, like, I'm exempt from the temple tax, but in order to not offend people, I will pay it. But you provide supernaturally to do that. With Moses, you provided supernatural favor so that he could go in and command the Israelites out. God, we thank you that you use the language that we can understand. You're not confusing. You're not hiding. You're not keeping your answers from us. You want to explain. And so, God, we come to you today hungry with questions. I just encourage every person that's listening to come with your questions. Make a list. Come to the Lord with your questions. He wants to answer them in a language that you understand. He wants to father you. And then, God, I pray that we have the agility, the flexibility in our thinking, the way that you came to Moses when he was 80 years old, maybe stuck in his ways. I know that I can be. God, to transform us, give us the power to be transformed in faith. Raise our faith level to the place where we are agile and we are able to flex with your plan, to not get set in our ways and to put your plan, how Jesus taught us yesterday, that your concerns are greater than our concerns. We take up our cross and follow you. So God, we thank you that we get to learn these things that put us in a place to be in right relationship with you and to work towards your end above ours, because it is such an honorable, admirable, and loving end that we are working towards. We thank you, Lord. It is in your holy name that we pray. Amen. All right, guys. It's been an amazing day in Exodus together. Can't wait to see you back tomorrow for day 27. We'll see you there.